Milford is a charming coastal city located in Connecticut, United States. Situated on the Long Island Sound, it offers picturesque views and a vibrant community. Covering an area of just over 25 square miles, it has a population of over 50,000 people. Known for its beautiful beaches, Milford attracts visitors and residents alike who appreciate its scenic landscapes and waterfront activities. The city boasts a rich history dating back to colonial times with a blend of historic architecture and modern amenities. The people of Milford would never know that a tragedy was about to befall them in 2022. But first, let's uncover the layers of her past. Julie Minogue entered the world on July 19, 1982, in the charming town of Goshen, New York. She was blessed with loving parents, Gerald J. Minogue and Sandra Barrish-Stopper, who nourished her alongside her two siblings, sister Allison Barati Corcoran and brother Peter Gerald Minogue. Growing up, Julie thrived academically, attending the esteemed Monroe-Woodbury schools and later graduating from Monroe-Woodbury High School. She further pursued her education at Orange County Community College, expanding her knowledge and embracing new experiences along the way. After college, Julie Minogue became a devoted medical assistant at Connecticut Coastal Obstetrics Gynecology and found joy in various aspects of her life. She embraced an active lifestyle, regularly engaging in running and walking to keep herself energized. However, her true passion lay in being a mother to her two sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner. The details about her marriage and husband are unknown at this point. Julie's dedication and love as a single mother were remarkable, shaping the strong bond shared among them. Julie Minogue found love once again in 2017 and got into a relationship with a man from Roxbury named Ewan Anthony DeWitt. Together, they welcomed a son in 2019 named Luke Anthony Minogue into their lives. However, as time passed, difficulties arose in their relationship, which led Julie to make the decision to leave Ewan in 2021. She moved with her sons to a condo on Salem Walk in Milford, and their well-being remained her top priority. In 2022, Nicholas, the eldest son, was 21 years old and had bravely served his country in the Coast Guard, while Sean, at 17 years old, was a vibrant young man thriving as a high school senior. Her son with Ewan, Luke, was 3 and a bright light in their household. Julie herself was 40, and all seemed well for her and her 3 boys. But tragedy was waiting just around the corner. Late at night on December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Sean Minogue was startled awake by chilling screams. He didn't wake up at the first noise and dismissed it, thinking that it could just be echoes from the neighborhood. But the cries grew louder and more urgent, and he realized something was terribly wrong. Concerned about his mother's safety, Sean rushed down the stairs. As he descended, amidst the darkness, he caught a glimpse of a chilling scene. A man wielding an axe and his mother lying on the floor, her body drenched in blood. In the midst of the chaos, Sean heard the haunting words, "You didn't believe me," ringing in his ears. In a panic, the teenager raced upstairs and swiftly locked the door, determined to keep himself safe. He dialed 911 and urgently reported the horrifying scene that had unfolded before him. Determined to provide an extra layer of protection, he quickly placed a sturdy chair behind the locked door. With his heart pounding, he opened his window, desperately reaching out for help. Within minutes, police officers arrived and entered the house, but the teenager, gripped by fear, leapt out of the window. That's when he heard Milford PD shouts and realized it was not the intruder. Eventually, the authorities found the courageous teen and ensured his safety. In a devastating discovery, the police entered the kitchen to find Julie Minogue lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Her face and skull had been injured by multiple deep cuts. A chilling sight awaited them as they spotted a large axe resting on the stove nearby, carrying evidence of the horrific crime. Meanwhile, in the living room, Julie's young son, Luke, who was 3 years old, sat on the couch completely stunned and unresponsive. Not a tear nor a word escaped him, as if he was frozen in shock. The officer stayed by his side and offered him comfort and support until additional officers arrived at the scene. Following her tragic demise, Julie's body was carefully transported to the Connecticut office of the Chief Medical Examiner for a thorough examination. After conducting a meticulous autopsy, the medical examiner determined the cause of her death to be the chopped wounds and blunt impact injuries on the head, torso, and extremities. The detailed findings provided crucial evidence regarding the nature of the attack, shedding light on the tragic circumstances surrounding her untimely demise. As the police took custody of the axe found on the gas stove, they meticulously combed through every inch of the area, determined to uncover any potential evidence that could lead them closer to the perpetrator. Inside the house, they embarked on an extensive search, carefully examining each room for any clues that could shed light on the heinous crime. The commotion attracted the attention of concerned neighbors who gathered nearby. The atmosphere was tense as the community was eager to support the investigation in any way they could. Amidst the growing crowd, a helpful neighbor came forward with an unexpected piece of evidence. Ring camera footage from outside his house at Long Meadow Complex. The police eagerly seized the opportunity, hoping that the footage might hold a crucial clue. As they watched the footage, they witnessed an unsettling sight. An individual walking with an axe in hand closely resembling the description provided by Sean. The discovery sent a wave of anticipation through the investigators as they realized they might have found a significant lead. The police began to look into who this man with the axe could be. That very day, December 6, 2022, a crucial breakthrough took place when a concerned woman called the police, recounting a chilling phone call from her son. In her trembling voice, she shared the shocking revelation that her son had just called her and said that he had killed his girlfriend. The urgency in her words spurred an immediate response from law enforcement. Determined to unravel the truth, they swiftly tracked down the woman and engaged her in conversation. It was then revealed that the man responsible for this ominous confession was none other than Ewan DeWitt, the 42-year-old man who was once in a relationship with Julie. With this vital information in hand, the police dialed Ewan's number, hoping to engage him in a crucial conversation. However, their efforts were met with resistance as Ewan abruptly hung up the call. So it was important for the police to look into Ewan's history, which they believed could provide them the vital information needed to proceed further. Born in the town of Roxbury in 1979, Ewan Anthony DeWitt possessed a diverse range of interests and pursuits. As a talented athlete, he pursued his passion for ice hockey and even reached the level of playing semi-professionally. Ewan's thirst for knowledge led him to obtain a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College, showcasing his intellectual curiosity. He was not a person who would be satisfied with a single vocation, so he also embarked on the journey to become a firefighter. Additionally, he shared his expertise as a personal trainer. In 2006, Ewan was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. He pleaded guilty, resulting in a suspended prison sentence and probation. After this, Ewan DeWitt's journey took an inspiring turn when he joined the prestigious ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps in 2009, where he embarked on a path as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer. He served his country for 5 years and attained the rank of Lance Corporal in 2011. In a remarkable photo from his time in the Marines, Lance Corporal Ewan DeWitt is seen in action as a machine gunner. The picture shows him courageously operating a powerful M250 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during an important defense of the Amphibious Task Force naval exercise. The event took place on December 3, 2011, aboard the USS Kearsarge. With his leadership qualities and expertise, he assumed the role of a machine gun section leader in the esteemed 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, dedicating himself to his duties, serving multiple tours in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and other classified locations with his dedicated brothers. Ewan and his brother's inspiring story was captured in a 2015 article in the Register Citizen, highlighting their collective efforts to restore a piece of history. Ewan's life took a darker turn when he faced legal trouble. In November 2019, the Milford police arrested him for assaulting a victim, which resulted in a protective order being issued by the court. The case remains unresolved, as court records revealed that it was still pending. With his next court date scheduled for April 14, 2023, Ewan maintained his innocence by pleading not guilty. He was released on a $20,000 bond, awaiting the judicial process to unfold. Ewan's troubled past included a disturbing incident in which he was arrested for his actions towards Julie shortly after the birth of their son. Reports stated that he had thrown a large object at Julie Minogue and had also destroyed her phone to prevent her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house and contacted the authorities. The incident highlighted the alarming nature of Ewan's behavior and its impact on those around him, adding another layer of intensity to the unfolding events. In 2021, he faced charges of assaulting emergency personnel and a female in Wake County, North Carolina. Court records indicated that he pled guilty and received a combined jail sentence of 95 days. Although the exact duration of his incarceration remained unknown, these encounters with the law showcased a pattern of concerning behavior, raising further questions about Ewan's character and past actions. Behind Ewan DeWitt's troubled history, a darker pattern of violence emerged, specifically targeting Julie Minogue. Several protective orders were filed against Ewan due to previous instances of domestic violence. These orders were issued in November 2019 and January 2021, and were put in place to safeguard not only Julie but also the children who were present during those incidents. One such incident involved Ewan being intoxicated and engaging in a heated argument with Julie. According to a statement provided by the victim's son, Ewan had thrown a playpen at Julie's head, which resulted in a distressing injury. While Ewan was in rehabilitation, Julie took steps to file a restraining order, seeking protection from his harmful actions. Despite this, Ewan was granted visitation rights, which left a lingering sense of unease and concern about the safety of those involved. In addition to their troubled relationship, Julie and Ewan DeWitt found themselves entangled in family court cases beginning in 2021. It all began when Julie filed a petition for child support for their son Luke in August 2021. In October 2021, a judge ruled in her favor and ordered Ewan to provide financial support. As tensions continued to escalate, Ewan took Julie to court in December 2021, seeking resolution regarding visitation rights. The court intervened and granted supervised visitation for Ewan in April 2022, with a scheduled hearing in April 2023 to further address the matter. These legal battles shed light on the complexities and challenges faced by Julie and Ewan as they navigated their post-relationship dynamics. As the investigation progressed, new details were revealed. On November 14, 2022, just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took a decisive step by visiting the Milford Police Department to file a complaint against Ewan. She alleged that he had bombarded her with over 200 text messages within a span of just 2 days, despite the existence of a protective order that explicitly forbade him from contacting her. Officer Scott Nablin listened to Julie's concerns and diligently collected evidence of the text messages from her phone, further fortifying the case against Ewan. In a heartfelt plea for protection, Julie Minogue expressed her deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children in a sworn affidavit submitted on November 17, 2022. Determined to put an end to the ongoing abuse, she stated, "I don't believe I should endure this mistreatment any longer." Fearful of the consequences, she detailed the relentless harassment she faced. Julie Minogue also wrote in the document that, "Ewan has got himself into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol, and I'm scared he's going to kill me." Officer Nablin, resolute in his pursuit of justice, meticulously crafted an arrest warrant alleging Ewan's violation of the protective order. The document, filled with crucial details, was reviewed by a supervisor, ensuring its accuracy and validity. They made sure that the arrest warrant application contained the requisite probable cause to support the charge that the text messages sent by Ewan DeWitt violated the modified protective order that was issued on January 15, 2021. On November 21, 2022, the completed warrant application made its way to the Milford State's Attorney's Office. However, the story took an unexpected turn as the Assistant State's Attorney, committed to thoroughness, sent the warrant application back to Officer Nablin and requested further information before proceeding. In this delicate dance between law and justice, every step forward demanded meticulous attention to detail. However, on December 1, 2022, Julie Minogue successfully obtained a civil restraining order from a judge. In the hearing, which lasted about an hour, Julie presented evidence of the text messages, Ewan's struggles with substance abuse, mental health issues, and a history of violence. She expressed concern for Ewan's well-being, describing his bipolar rage and erratic behavior, and emphasized the importance of him receiving proper treatment and therapy. Julie firmly believed that Ewan should not be allowed around anyone until he had received the necessary help and support. Recognizing the imminent danger she faced, a no-contact restraining order was swiftly issued on December 1, 2022, providing a legal shield against any further interaction with Ewan. This order took a darker turn when, 5 days later, Ewan killed Julie with an axe in her condo. Now, all the evidence indicated that Ewan was the main focus of the investigation, and the search for him intensified as the police tirelessly canvassed the area around the Salem Walk condominium, leaving no stone unturned. Their efforts led them to a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, where they sought the assistance of the local community. They approached patrons, informing them about the ongoing investigation and urging them to notify the authorities if they spotted Ewan DeWitt. It was during this concerted effort that 2 observant individuals caught sight of a person who matched the suspect's description. Eager to aid the investigation, they immediately flagged down the police, providing crucial information about the suspect's whereabouts. Engaging with one of the witnesses, who preferred to remain anonymous, police learned that the individual had witnessed someone resembling the suspect wandering around the parking lot for a brief period. Eventually, the suspect entered a food truck located in the parking lot. Acting swiftly, the police converged on the scene. Without incident, they apprehended Ewan DeWitt on December 6, 2022, bringing him into custody and moving one step closer to uncovering the truth. The police initiated a rigorous interrogation of Ewan in the early hours of December 6, 2022. Initially, Ewan maintained a stoic silence, withholding vital information. However, after hours of intense questioning, a breakthrough occurred. Ewan finally confessed to the gruesome act of taking Julie's life with an axe. He revealed that he had silently entered the house through the kitchen window, concealing himself in anticipation of his victim's arrival. When Julie eventually entered the kitchen, he launched an attack, wielding the axe with deadly intent. It was during this horrifying moment that Sean, Julie's son, descended the stairs and confronted the scene. Overwhelmed with fear, Ewan fled, leaving the axe behind on the gas stove. Ewan's admission sent shockwaves through the investigation, bringing forth a chilling account of the tragic events that unfolded that night. During Ewan's initial court appearance in State Superior Court in Milford on December 7, 2022, Assistant State's Attorney Alana Paul informed the judge about new developments in the case. She revealed that Ewan had fully admitted to the incident, but even without that admission, she believed the evidence against him was substantial. Attorney Paul highlighted the presence of surveillance footage and the testimony of Julie's son, who had observed part of the incident. Given the seriousness of the case, Paul argued that a significant bond was necessary. Emphasizing the gravity of the situation, Judge Armin Garoyan set his bond at $5 million. The judge expressed concerns about Ewan's history of disregarding court orders and emphasized the importance of public safety. In light of the circumstances, Ewan was placed on suicide watch with a hearing scheduled for December 14, 2022, to further address the case. Finally, it was the day of the final decision. On December 14, 2022, in addition to the murder charge, Ewan DeWitt faced multiple other charges brought forth by the Milford police. These included criminal violation of a protective order, criminal violation of a restraining order, risk of injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. By levying these charges, law enforcement sought to address the broader scope of Ewan's alleged actions and their impact. A hearing was scheduled for Ewan DeWitt's pending criminal cases on April 6, 2023. He has yet to plead. Prosecutors stated that Ewan had already confessed to the murder of Julie Minogue. However, no further information has been released by the police about the hearing. In a statement, the family expressed their determination to take action and ensure that those who neglected their responsibilities are held accountable. They also expressed their hope that this case would serve as a catalyst for improved protections for individuals facing domestic violence and abuse. With their unwavering commitment, the family aims to bring about positive changes and prevent such tragic incidents from occurring in the future. This case involved a combination of diligent efforts by law enforcement and the heinous acts of a killer who killed his ex-girlfriend in a rage of anger. The case of Savannah Gold. In 2017, Sherry's world was turned upside down in Florida when her daughter Savannah failed to show up for work at the restaurant where she was employed. Sherry was unaware that this ordinary day would be the last time she'd see Savannah. An hour later, the restaurant called Sherry to inform her that Savannah hadn't arrived for her shift, which was unusual since she had never missed work before. However, the events that unfolded after that call were even more bizarre. When Savannah's father received a message on her behalf, riddled with spelling mistakes and lacking punctuation, he instantly knew it wasn't his 21-year-old daughter who had written it. The impersonator claimed Savannah had met an amazing guy, fallen in love, and decided to elope with him, promising to call later. Savannah's father, Daniel Gold, carefully read the text message, paying close attention to its content. He knew his daughter well and was convinced that running away with her boyfriend was out of character for her. While Daniel studied his phone screen, trying to make sense of the message, Savannah's older brother Chris received a similar text, saying she was leaving with her boyfriend and that she was okay. Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong, so he immediately started calling his daughter's phone, only to find it turned off. Savannah Paige Gold was born on April 26, 1996, to Daniel and Sherry Gold. She lived with her parents and older brother, Chris, in Jacksonville, Florida. Savannah enjoyed various hobbies, including playing lacrosse, drawing, and dancing. Those close to her believed she embodied her last name, being a loving, kind, and caring person always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Savannah turned down a college scholarship for art and design to care for her mother, Sherry, who had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. To support her mother, Savannah took on household responsibilities and also worked as a waiter at Bonefish Grill, a restaurant. By the summer of 2017, she had been working at the restaurant for 2 years. On August 2nd, Savannah left for work at around 5 p.m. wearing her uniform, as her shift was scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. However, less than an hour later, Sherry received a call from the restaurant asking why Savannah had not shown up for work. This surprised Sherry, as she knew her daughter was responsible and had seen her leave the house in her uniform, indicating that she had indeed gone to work. After Savannah's father received a suspicious phone call, her father and brother started getting strange messages that they didn't think were from her. They suspected someone was impersonating Savannah. Before this, Savannah's father had tried to contact the police, but he couldn't reach his daughter. She was reported missing, and the police launched a search for her. Since sending those messages, Savannah's phone and social media accounts have been inactive. The police first went to the establishment where she worked to investigate. They found her unlocked car in the parking lot, about 120 yards from the restaurant entrance. Her personal documents, wallet, cards, cash, and other valuable items were still inside the car. It was clear to the police that the story about Savannah running away with her lover was a lie. If Savannah had planned to disappear, she would have taken her documents and bank cards with her to avoid being traced. It didn't make sense that she would leave them behind in her car. Initially, there were no signs of a struggle or crime near or inside the car, except for the flat left front tire. Forensic experts were called to investigate, and detectives visited the restaurant to speak with Savannah's coworkers. However, they all claimed that Savannah hadn't come to work that day, and that no one had seen her. The presence of Savannah's car parked 120 yards from the restaurant led detectives to suspect that something might have happened to her after she arrived at work. They began canvassing local establishments, particularly those with surveillance cameras, to review the footage and identify the moment Savannah parked her car. Although the image quality was poor, the police were able to see from the footage that Savannah parked her car, got out, and walked to a nearby silver Chevrolet Malibu sedan. For 14 minutes, she stood next to the driver's door, talking to the person behind the wheel. She then opened the back door and got in, and the driver followed suit. The police watched as the car shook, and the back door swung open 3 times before being closed again. Officers suspected that a fight had broken out inside the car between Savannah and the Chevrolet's owner. Shortly after, the man exited the car, approached Savannah's vehicle, opened the driver's door, and removed something from inside. He then punctured the front left tire, got back into his vehicle, and drove away without Savannah ever getting out. The owner of the Chevrolet Malibu was quickly identified as Lee Rodarte, a 28-year-old manager and chef at the restaurant where Savannah worked. He had helped distribute flyers with Savannah's picture during the police investigation and claimed not to have seen her for about 3 weeks, citing their different work shifts. However, when detectives re-interviewed restaurant employees, they discovered that Lee and Savannah's relationship went beyond a professional one. Several people came forward to reveal that the two had met secretly after hours and were romantically involved, a fact that Lee had failed to disclose to the police. On August 5th, during his work shift, Rodarte was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. When he arrived, he immediately warned the detectives that he struggled with reading and writing. In response, they thoroughly explained his rights, including his right to an attorney and the fact that anything he said could be used against him in court. Rodarte then admitted that he had previously lied to the police when they interviewed the restaurant staff, saying he hadn't seen Savannah in a long time. In reality, he had seen her on the day she went missing, but he was afraid that if he told the truth, he would become a suspect in her disappearance, which is why he had lied. Lee said he had met Savannah about 2 years ago when she started working at the restaurant. However, their socializing outside of work began around 8 months ago. At that time, he was already in a relationship with someone named Chelsea. When Chelsea discovered he had been unfaithful to her, she ended their relationship. Rodarte claims he dated Savannah for 3 months before she started using illegal drugs, which led him to end their relationship and reunite with Chelsea. Following the breakup, Rodarte and Savannah allegedly agreed to maintain a professional relationship, limited to their work at the restaurant, as per company policy prohibiting romantic relationships among employees. Rodarte also states that Savannah had disclosed their intimate relationship to other waiters with the intention of getting him fired. Lee last saw Savannah on a Wednesday afternoon. He drove to the mall on August 2nd to talk to her and persuade her not to spread rumors about their relationship as he feared losing his job at the restaurant where he had worked for 5 years. When he met her, Savannah had just taken a strong substance and was panicking, so she asked if she could sit in his car for a bit. Once inside, he demanded that she stop telling people they were still dating. Savannah asked him to join her in the back seat so they could talk. After moving to the back seat, Lee again asked Savannah to stop spreading rumors, but she refused, saying she would do as she pleased. This response infuriated Lee, who then got out, slashed a tire on Savannah's car and returned. When Savannah asked why he had done it, Lee admitted he was upset and angry. Next, as Rodarte claimed, Savannah exited his vehicle and headed towards the mall entrance, but didn't reach it. Instead, she got into an old green Ford pickup truck with tinted windows. At this point, she was holding her phone. However, detectives were aware that Savannah never left Rodarte's car and that he was lying. Unbeknownst to Rodarte, the police had surveillance footage that disproved his claim, showing no Ford pickup truck and Savannah remaining in his car. When asked about subsequent events, Lee stated that he drove home, even detailing the streets he took. Notably, the man had scratches on his arms and neck, which he attributed to a workplace injury when questioned about their origin. When detectives directly asked Rodarte about Savannah's whereabouts, he claimed to have no knowledge. The detectives adjusted their questioning strategy. At first, they listened attentively to his stories, showing interest, but soon they applied gentle pressure. They informed him straightforwardly that evidence contradicted his claim that Savannah had exited his car. After a brief time, Rodarte altered his statement, asserting that he and Savannah had gone to his residence, and then she departed. The detectives remained skeptical and urged him to reveal the entire truth, considering Savannah's family's well-being. Rodarte ultimately admitted to fatally snapping Savannah's neck during a backseat argument in his vehicle. Following their departure from the parking lot, he sent messages to Savannah's father and brother from her phone. Before discarding it out the window, Rodarte returned the body to his property, intending to dispose of it by fire, but he soon discovered it wasn't as simple as he thought. Instead, he dug a hole and buried the body, only to later exhume it, wrap it in a blanket, and drive approximately 8 miles from the restaurant to a nearby pond where he discarded the body. Although the autopsy couldn't determine the exact cause of Savannah's death, the examination revealed that her neck wasn't broken, as Rodarte had claimed, and no illegal substances were found in her body. However, forensic experts discovered that the thyroid cartilage in Savannah's throat was fractured, suggesting strangulation, and roughly 75% of her body exhibited fire damage. Despite confessing to the crimes, Rodarte maintained his not guilty plea on charges of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a dead body. The autopsy revealed that the condition of Savannah's body was too compromised to determine an exact cause of death. Contrary to Rodarte's claims, her neck was not broken and no illegal substances were found in her system. However, the autopsy did indicate that Savannah was strangled as her thyroid cartilage was broken and approximately 75% of her body had been burned. Rodarte's confession was revoked at trial, where he claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Savannah had initiated the strangulation. This reversal put Savannah's family through additional trauma, forcing them to attend numerous court hearings. Sherry Gold, Savannah's mother, has battled recurring cancer during this ordeal, but she remains committed to attending every hearing alongside her family. They have been present at 26 out of 27 hearings, enduring the emotional toll of facing Rodarte, the man responsible for their daughter's death. The family's primary concern now is to bring this painful process to a close and secure justice for Savannah. Lee Rodarte was not the only family member to be charged with murder. In 2016, a year before Lee committed his crime, his sister Amber Camarillo, then 26, and still known by her maiden name Rodarte, shot and killed a woman during a dispute over a car. She received a 20-year prison sentence. Lee Rodarte was offered a plea deal, which required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence. In return, the charges of tampering with physical evidence and abuse of the body would be dropped. After consulting with his attorneys, Rodarte accepted the deal and was sentenced to 40 years in prison on March 11, 2021. Following the verdict, Savannah's family expressed gratitude to everyone for their support. Daniel Gold stated that they loved Savannah and were overwhelmed to discover how many others also cared for her. Today's episode takes us to Ashburn in Virginia, home to 21-year-old Bethany and Decker. Bethany's mother Kim said her daughter was just simply a joy to be around, always upbeat and had been smiling since the day she was born. She had 2 younger siblings who said she was the leader of the pack, confident, encouraging, and supportive. After years of excelling in school, she was accepted into George Mason University, hoping to gain a degree in global and economic change. One of her roommates said she could put off an essay until the night before, write it in an hour and come out with an A star. She was very intelligent, she recalled. It was in her freshman year that Bethany met Emil Decker, a cadet in the Reserve Officers Training Corps who was set to join the Army National Guard. Emil was a hopeless romantic, and Bethany's family said she could mention the smallest, most seemingly insignificant thing just once and he would remember it and try and act on it. Bethany's family adored him and he fit right in as if they'd been together their whole lives. After a couple of years of dating, Emil proposed. No sooner had they got engaged than Bethany found out she was pregnant. The young couple were so excited to start their family and life together, and although the baby had come sooner than maybe planned, the pregnancy was a welcome surprise. They called their baby boy Kai. However, family and friends said the stress of a newborn baby on top of having little money to support them soon set in. While Emil started training with the Army National Guard units, Bethany, who was still studying at George Mason, took up a part-time job in a restaurant to get some more money. The stress only mounted further when Emil started prepping to be deployed to Afghanistan. Between both their families helping out, the pair were just about coping. But knowing Emil would soon be away for long periods of time was hard for Bethany to deal with. She said she felt like the pair were drifting apart and they were living in two completely separate worlds. She told Emil she worried they had rushed into things and should have taken more time to plan. Some sources say at this point they decided to try a separation and take a break. Emil was upset but wanted to give Bethany what she needed. As he left the country, Bethany moved into a new apartment so she could be closer to her job and pick up as many shifts as possible. One day at the restaurant, things would take a massive shift, which changed the course of everything. Bethany met 31-year-old Ronald Roldan, who was originally from Bolivia. Before long, the pair were involved in a romantic relationship. Bethany told friends she was lonely and isolated, with Emil being overseas for such long periods of time, and despite her friends' reservations, Ronald soon moved into Bethany's apartment. Her best friend Sarah said she was shocked and warned her against it, but she ultimately wanted to see Bethany happy, and Bethany was going to do what she wanted to anyway. She and Emil were still separated and communication was dwindling, but he could sense something was going on. The relationship with Ronald was bad from the get-go. He was controlling, jealous, and violent, and everyone saw it in him. Kim said she was frightened, hearing horror stories about what was going on inside the apartment. She even suspected that Ronald had hurt Kai, as Kai not only seemed scared of him, but he had a black eye on one occasion. The story they were told was that a friend was watching him and he fell backwards off of a chair. But Bethany's family were not so sure. They also found out that Ronald had phoned Kai's daycare and pretended to be Emil. Fortunately, the daycare could tell something was wrong and nothing happened. But this resulted in them setting up a code to use over the phone, so they knew not to answer to Ronald if he called again. Ronald would text and call constantly, asking to see proof of where she was and who she was with. He would even follow her to houses she said she was going to, just to make sure she actually was, and then he would sit and wait for her outside until she left. Bethany was now in a very bad situation and decided to come clean and tell Emil everything, saying she knew she had made a mistake. Emil still wanted to make things work, saying his family was his priority. He said he could tell that something had been wrong for many months, as she was now working about 6 days a week and barely talking to him, and when she did communicate, she was distant and not present. Bethany and Emil decided to go on holiday when he was home on leave to try and patch things up. Their marriage was hanging by a thread at this point, and the situation was messy to say the least. She was telling her mother and friends that the situation with Ronald was now so bad she needed to either get him out somehow or leave the apartment herself in secret. She and Kim started working on a plan to make this happen. As 2010 came to an end, Emil sent a sweet message to his young family. In mid-January 2011, he was granted leave and the pair decided they would still go on holiday together. As Bethany met him at the airport, it was clear there was another issue to contend with. Bethany was pregnant again and Ronald was the father. Emil said he wasn't angry and still wanted the holiday in Hawaii to go ahead. He said, "I'd been overseas and it was a completely different world. Coming back to the United States, I was just happy to be home, to be alive, to be with my family. That anything else in the whole entire world really did not matter to me at all. It was definitely a make or break trip, and by all accounts they did have a lovely time in Hawaii. It was the most they'd seen each other, laughed together, and just talked in ages. Felt like things could start to get back on track." When Emil and Bethany got back on the 28th of January, Bethany visited her grandma. They had a nice afternoon making pizza and talking about the trip, but her grandma said she could tell there were more stories than Bethany was sharing. She was so young with so much going on, and everything was clearly getting on top of her. Bethany later confided that she was drowning in stress, guilt, and sadness, and it was the lowest she had felt in her whole life. Later that night, Emile joined them for dinner where the crisis talks continued. Without warning, Bethany's phone started to go off. She grabbed her things and rushed out, saying they didn't understand what was going to happen to her if she didn't go home. Emile was due back in just a few days, and although the break had been good for them, it still wasn't clear how things would be once he left. Bethany drove back to her apartment as Emile packed up, ready to fly out on the 2nd of February. The plan was she would meet him at the airport to see him off, telling him, "I will always be there no matter what." On February 2nd, Emile arrived at the airport hoping to see Bethany there, but she didn't turn up. He called her restaurant, and they said she hadn't been into work for the last few days. Before he boarded, he called around Bethany's family to give them the heads up that something seemed wrong. Regardless of any issues the pair ever had, Bethany was always at the airport to see him go. Over the next few days, friends and family tried to make contact with Bethany, but she didn't answer her phone once. Bethany's mother Kim then received a few strange phone calls, which remain undisclosed, and Bethany's friend Sarah got some Facebook messages that stood out immediately. She logged in and saw that Bethany was online. Having not heard from her in a while, she started up a chat in Messenger. She said she knew right away it was not Bethany sending the messages back. The English was broken, words were misspelled, and basic things she would have been able to answer, she couldn't. Sarah called Kim and told her suspicions. Emile also got an email from Bethany's account, and he too said he didn't believe his wife had typed it. By this point, they had received messages from 4 different people, all saying they thought Bethany's Facebook account had been hacked into. Bethany's grandparents live closer to Bethany than Kim, so they decided to drive over to her complex. They found Bethany's car parked outside. It was at an odd angle with a flat tire. This was even more odd because no one had seen her car there before this point. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. They knocked on the door, but the silence was deafening. They called 911 on February 19th and reported her missing. Bethany's family said it was not unusual for her to go several days without talking to anyone or replying, and before they all knew it, it was 3 weeks later. Given the fact she hadn't seen or spoken to anyone during this time, as well as being pregnant, authorities did not miss a beat and moved quickly, concerned they had already lost a lot of time. A quick search of her phone, credit and debit cards showed they had not been accessed since January 29th. She hadn't shown up to any of her classes. She hadn't checked herself into any of the nearby hospitals. She hadn't gone into work, and given the fact her passport was at home, she hadn't left the country either. When police went to her apartment, they determined there were no signs of any forced entry or a struggle, and nothing appeared to be glaringly out of place. Her belongings were all still there, indicating she hadn't packed up to go anywhere either. There was nothing inside her car that indicated foul play or pointed to where she might have gone. It was now the first week of March and detectives decided to hold a press conference. Divers were searching the waters, canine units were around the fields, and the FBI were brought in too. Police were getting leads, but they were going nowhere. None of these tips came to anything. It seemed that the last person to have seen Bethany given the timeline they knew was Emile. He was granted permission to fly home and help with the investigation. He voluntarily took a polygraph test and underwent hours of interrogation, answering everything twice over, and was completely supportive of everything the police needed. He said he had absolutely nothing to do with Bethany being missing, and even despite all their issues, his mind was racing and he was deeply concerned. He said he understood why he was being looked at so closely. He happened to leave the country around the same time she went missing, and had just found out she was pregnant with another man's child, but he said he let the police ask everything they needed to, no matter how painful the questions were, so they could rule him out and he could start helping. All of his movements in between the 28th of January and the 2nd of February were all accounted for as well. Authorities had to consider the possibility that given all of her stresses, she had just wanted a total break and had dipped off the radar. But going this long without talking to her mother and grandmother and without seeing Kai was definitely not the Bethany they knew. The police were still treating her disappearance as a missing persons case and not anything more sinister. They didn't identify anyone as a suspect, calling it premature and saying they wanted to encourage the public to keep looking for her without putting anything into their heads. There was, however, one more person they needed to talk to, Ronald Roldan. He was no longer living in the apartment and they had found him at his parents' house. He told them he had moved out recently as the relationship had come to an end. His story actually informed the detectives that he was the last person to see her. Whereas Emil had last seen her on the 28th of January, Ronald said he saw her on the afternoon of January the 29th. He said she was in the apartment and she seemed her usual self. This was partly corroborated by the manager, who said that she had called in just after 2 p.m. on January 29th to get her next shifts for the week. She also confirmed her shift for that night, but she never showed up to work it. Ronald said he hadn't reported her disappearance, as now the relationship was over. He naturally just hadn't had any communication with her to even realize she was missing. ATM records showed that he left Bethany's apartment the afternoon she was last seen and made a withdrawal from his bank at 4:26 p.m. He then returned to the apartment after getting a text from his ex-girlfriend Danielle, with whom he shared 2 children. Ronald sent 2 messages to Bethany, one at 4:01 p.m. and one at 4:31 p.m., to tell her he would be staying with his children at their apartment. But it was confirmed that after Bethany contacted work at 2:08 p.m., her phone had no activity. Whether these messages were received is still unknown, but it appeared he had been trying to get hold of her. Danielle said she did drop the children with him at about 4:30 p.m., and Ronald told her he wasn't sure if Bethany would be coming back, as the couple had had a fight and she'd taken off. When Danielle returned a few days later, Ronald told her he hadn't seen or heard from Bethany since that day. A search warrant was now issued for his apartment, but this turned up nothing. His computer, phone, and hard drives were all seized, but they drew a blank here as well. A quick background check on Ronald found he did have history with the police, but at this point there was absolutely nothing to link him to Bethany's disappearance. Given the fact that detectives now knew he was the last person to see her, he was considered a person of interest but not a suspect. Bethany's story was now national news, made even more intriguing for journalists when it got out that she had been married to a man that they had interviewed and was having a baby with another man who was now a potential person of interest. May 2011 would be the month Bethany was due to give birth, and detectives issued another press release, contacting hospitals to see if she had checked in anywhere. Again, they were met with silence. The months would soon turn into years and time was slipping by. Police were still no further forward than when they had started. But in May 2012, a new detective was assigned to the case, and the family said they were hopeful for fresh eyes that could help them. On this particular year, what would have been Bethany's 23rd birthday coincided with Mother's Day, and family and friends gathered to spread awareness and share stories. Emil and Kai were also in attendance. Kim even connected with the Harrington family, who lost their daughter Morgan in 2009, a case we actually covered on the channel a while ago. They cut a big cake for Bethany, made in her favorite color, orange. In late 2012, Investigation Discovery aired an episode of their show Disappeared, dedicated to Bethany's case, which gave it more attention but still no answers. As time continued to pass, the tips and leads became few and far between, and focuses on other investigations had to take priority. Emil eventually filed for divorce from Bethany and was given sole custody of their son Kai. Everything remained pretty quiet until November 2014, when a completely separate 911 call would shine a whole new light on the case. On the 12th of November 2014, police in North Carolina responded to a shocking call. It was almost 2 a.m. and it appeared to be a very serious domestic incident. A woman called Vicky said she had shot her boyfriend twice in self-defense when he had attacked her. Out of nowhere, he had walked up behind her, grabbed her by her hair and snapped her neck, breaking it in 2 places. He then started punching and biting her. Despite being in what must have been immense pain, Vicky managed to grab her gun and shoot him twice. He then snatched the gun off her and shot her 3 times, once in the head. She still managed to crawl out of the house all the way to a neighbor's home. Her neighbor locked the doors, grabbed his gun and called 911. Vicky's boyfriend was none other than Ronald Roldan. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder, although much to Vicky's anger the attempted murder charge was dropped as he entered a plea deal. He was sentenced to a minimum of 6 years, and after completing his sentence, he was scheduled to be transferred into the custody of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, who would start the process of deporting him back to Bolivia. Vicky told authorities that Ronald had said he could make people disappear. A friend had even called Vicky and said that she had seen a Nancy Grace episode about Bethany's case, which named Ronald as a person of interest. Vicky confronted him and said his reaction terrified her. She knew something was wrong, but he now knew that she knew about Bethany, and she said the violence had escalated since that point. Vicky said if he was ever let out of prison, he would either come back to kill her or kill someone else. He was clearly a very dangerous and violent individual, and given everything Vicky had told them, he needed to be looked at once again in relation to Bethany's case. Vicky went on to tell her story on Dr. Phil. She had lost an eye because of him, Her neck had been broken in 2 places and she was facing financial ruin due to the cost of the medical bills. But she was determined to keep telling her story and help the police build their case. She contacted Kim personally to tell her everything she knew and offer her support. Investigators also found out that before he was seeing Vicky, Ronald was dating a waitress called April. She had pressed charges against him too when he pushed her down a flight of stairs, spat on her and threw all her belongings outside. He agreed to pay her $2,500 and the charges were eventually dropped. Detectives working on Bethany's case made the journey over to his new prison to interview him again. But he was verbally abusive, shouting and swearing at them, refusing to talk. This only spurred them on more. Through his lawyer, Ronald maintained he had nothing to do with Bethany's disappearance. He said he was hopeful that Bethany would come home and was praying for her safe return. In March 2019, investigators said there had now been positive movement in Bethany's case. They didn't specify the development, but they did say it came after a search warrant of Bethany's Facebook account was finally issued and analyzed. The search warrant had been signed by Detective Michael Boone, a man who was actually instrumental in solving the murders of Hannah Graham and Morgan Harrington. Morgan Harrington's family had become close to Kim, offering her a support system. Over the next year and into 2020, things again went quiet and the police didn't share anything with the media, keeping all their cards close to their chests. They were on the cusp of a huge break. November 2020. The news everyone had been waiting for almost a decade finally broke. The information that had pushed this forward showed that Bethany and Ronald's individual Facebook accounts were both accessed many times from the same IP address in the days around her disappearance. Ronald Roldan was finally arraigned on abduction charges, and just 1 month later, the charge was upgraded to second-degree murder in the case of Bethany and Decker. Prosecutors said the circumstantial evidence was very strong and it was a solid case. Ronald's lawyers asked for bail, but the judge said there was no way. He pleaded not guilty and his trial was scheduled to start in August 2021, but this was pushed back to February 2022. The trial was then set back a final time when the county sheriff's office released a further 60,000 files against Ronald, and his defense team needed more time to go through everything. The new trial would be January 30th, 2023, and this date would mark just a day after the 12-year anniversary of Bethany's disappearance. Everyone now just had to sit, wait, and continue to be patient just a little bit longer. However, no trial would commence. In November 2022, 41-year-old Ronald Roldan pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. As part of his plea agreement, he was asked to say what had happened that day. Ronald claimed they had gotten into an argument in the apartment and he pushed her. She fell and hit her head on the windowsill and died instantly. Too scared to call 911, he put her body into a large bag and dumped her into the trash compactor at the complex. He still denied using her Facebook account and maintained his story of it being accidental, and he panicked. Given his history of abuse and violence, police and experts doubt his claims of it being unintentional and a total accident, and his denial of accessing her accounts had also long been proven to be false. In February 2023, Ronald was given 12.5 years. He was actually sentenced to 40 years, which was the maximum. However, all but 12.5 were suspended due to his plea deal. He could still serve more time if he commits another crime or violates the conditions of his release. Through all the hearings, Kim and Vicky sat together and watched as he was sentenced. Bethany's family said they were angry that he will only be in prison a few months longer than they had spent searching for her. But they said they were grateful they finally had some sort of closure. So many lives have been affected by this case, and it was a long and painful wait for answers. To this day, Bethany's remains have never been found, and police feel it is unlikely they ever will be. Kim said all she can do is keep Bethany's memory alive and encourage people to be vocal and tell loved ones you care about them, because you just never know what will happen. She continues to work with Help Save the Next Girl, a national non-profit organization founded by Morgan Harrington's parents in her honor. It's a way of educating and spreading awareness by talking about safety and violence prevention. She said, "The night before Bethany was murdered, she called me and said, 'Mom, I love you.' That was the last thing she said. So I just want to encourage each and every one of you to not take for granted tomorrow and to really make sure that you are talking to your loved ones, that you're letting people know how much you care and not wait for the tomorrow which may never be." Stephanie Scott was born on October 14, 1988, in Sydney, Australia. She was the second youngest of 5 children born to Marilyn and Robert Scott, affectionately known as Bob. The family made their home in Canawindra, a small town with around 2,000 residents located in the central western region of New South Wales. Growing up in the serene and peaceful surroundings of their family farm, Stephanie and her siblings formed a close-knit, loving family that cherished the simple joys of life. Stephanie was an extraordinary child raised in a healthy, joyful environment brimming with love. She was not only beautiful and intelligent, but also possessed a kind, gentle, and compassionate personality. Known for her sense of humor, Stephanie loved playing pranks. Her loved ones described her as noble, affectionate, and down-to-earth, always willing to lend a helping hand. Putting others before herself was a fundamental aspect of her character. With her infectious joy and radiant smile, Stephanie could brighten anyone's day. Even from a young age, she displayed wisdom beyond her years, listening without judgment and offering the best advice. Her empathy and ability to inspire were remarkable, and she despised cruelty, especially towards children and animals. As a teenager with a keen sense of fashion, she became a role model for her peers. After finishing primary school, Stephanie attended the high school where her father worked. It was there that she met Erin Leeson Woolley, a charming classmate who shared her passion for football. They quickly became friends and both took part-time jobs at a local supermarket. Spending so much time together became like a member of the Scott family. Upon graduating from high school, Stephanie chose to follow in her father's footsteps and pursue a career in education. Erin supported her decision, even though it meant she would have to move to Wagga Wagga for university. The distance made them realize their true feelings for each other. In May 2010, during Erin's 21st birthday party, their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Despite the physical distance, they maintained their bond through frequent visits, shared holidays, and constant communication via phone and text. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and everyone believed they were meant to be together. After Stephanie graduated and returned home, she received a job offer in another town. The couple moved to Leighton, a small agricultural town in New South Wales. Before they left, Marilyn, proud of her daughter's achievements, gifted Stephanie a graduation ring. Once settled in their new home, Stephanie began her career teaching English and drama at Leighton High School. She was incredibly happy because teaching was undoubtedly her true passion. Her dedication to each student was evident. She didn't just impart knowledge, but also took a genuine interest in their feelings and thoughts. Stephanie became a mentor to many of them, her remarkable personality making her very popular among the students. She also earned the admiration and respect of her colleagues. Her ever-present smile reminded everyone that fulfilling one's vocation was a key to happiness. A joyous event took place on April 11, 2014. Stephanie and Erin got engaged. They set their wedding date for exactly a year later. Stephanie poured her heart into planning their wedding, meticulously attending to every detail to ensure their guests would enjoy the day as much as she would. Erin supported her every step of the way, even taking dance classes with her so their first dance as a married couple would be perfect. They also made reservations for their honeymoon in Fiji, convinced it was the most romantic destination for any couple in love. They never imagined their plans would be tragically cut short. On March 2, 2015, a new employee joined the company contracted to clean the school where Stephanie worked. His name was Vincent Stanford, a 24-year-old born on December 21, 1990 in Tasmania. Vincent had an identical twin named Marcus. When the twins were 3, the family moved to the Netherlands. His father eventually returned to Australia and lost contact with them, leaving his mother to raise the children alone. Vincent's childhood was typical, but as he grew, he became increasingly withdrawn and had severe difficulty socializing. His behavior problems at school escalated, earning him the nickname Psycho due to his violent outbursts. According to later reports, Vincent began having homicidal thoughts around the age of 7 or 8. At 12, he attacked his teacher, attempting to strangle her. As a result, he was expelled and sent to a behavior school for socially maladjusted children. Later, he was admitted to a psychiatric center for teenagers, where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. This diagnosis indicated his challenges in forming friendships and relationships. After his release, Vincent tried to enroll in university and join the military, but both attempts were unsuccessful. In 2013, he returned to Australia with his mother and siblings. Vincent appeared quiet and reserved with his distinct Dutch accent and had no friends or social contacts. He found the company of others stressful and cycled through various jobs before being hired by the cleaning company servicing Stephanie's school. Vincent's troubling behavior soon resurfaced. Unbeknownst to anyone, he began watching female students during lunch and secretly in the bathrooms. He fixated on a 12-year-old girl, stalking her both inside and outside school, taking daily photographs and documenting her movements in a notebook. He seemed to be planning to abduct her. It was later discovered that he also stalked 2 women working in nearby shops. By Easter week 2015, less than a week before Stephanie and Aaron's wedding, the couple was invited to a party in their hometown. Stephanie couldn't travel because she needed to prepare lessons for her substitute teacher and finalize a few details for the reception. Aaron didn't want to go without her, but wanted to see his parents and best friend before the wedding. On Friday, April 3rd at 12:30 p.m., Aaron left for his hometown, unaware that it would be the last time he would see the woman he was about to marry. The young couple kept in touch through calls and text messages. Aaron attended the Saturday night party and then stayed at his parents' house. He and his fiancée spoke on the phone, saying their goodnights around 10:30 p.m. On the morning of Sunday, April 5th, 2015, Stephanie left her home to go to the school. While on her way, she sent a text to Aaron detailing her plans for the day. Around 11 a.m., she parked her red Mazda 3 next to the school. Then she walked a few blocks to pick up the school keys from a colleague who lived nearby. Her coworker accompanied her back to the school and watched as she entered and locked the front door behind her. She went up to the second floor to the English teacher's lounge, where she sat down to work on her computer. Unexpectedly, Vincent was also in the building. Hearing noises, he passed by the lounge and saw Stephanie for the first time. Despite working there for over a month, he had never met her and had no idea she would be there. As he later confessed, upon seeing her, he felt an overwhelming urge to take her life. Vincent went home to retrieve what he called his assault kit, which consisted of a bottle of lubricant erectile dysfunction pills, several condoms, and some flexible handcuffs. It took him about 10 minutes to go and return. Upon arriving back at the school, he stayed downstairs, waiting for Stephanie to come out. Around 1 p.m., Stephanie sent an email to the bus driver who would transport the wedding guests from the ceremony to the reception hall, confirming that she had made the final payment to secure the service. An hour later, she finished her work, turned off her laptop, and packed up to leave. She retraced her steps back to the main entrance, walking down the corridor towards the large metal gate. Almost there, she encountered Vincent. She smiled and wished him a happy Easter. As she was taking her keys out of her bag, Vincent grabbed her from behind and covered her mouth with his hand. Terrified, the 26-year-old tried to scream for help and kicked and scratched, trying to escape, but he overpowered her and dragged her down the hallway into a dark photo development room. Once inside, Stephanie tried to flee, but Vincent violently pushed her to the floor. He used his left arm to pin her down by her throat and began savagely punching her face with his right fist for almost a minute, repeatedly, until she was unconscious. He then put on a condom and sexually assaulted her. Afterward, he took out a knife and inflicted several severe wounds to her neck. Once he was sure Stephanie was no longer breathing, he left the knife on the floor and went home to eat lunch. At home, he made himself a cheese sandwich and drank some coffee. Later, he returned to the school to clean the scene. Vincent washed the knife in the maintenance room and collected the items that had fallen from Stephanie in the hallway, including her car keys. He then moved her Mazda to the other side of the school. Returning to Stephanie, he placed yellow adhesive tape around her neck to contain the bleeding. Vincent placed a plastic sheet in the trunk of the car and put Stephanie's body on top. He closed the vehicle and re-entered the building, where he used a high-pressure cleaner to wash the crime scene. By then, it was past 3 p.m. Vincent left the school and drove Stephanie's car to his home, parking it behind a large shed in his backyard. He then walked back to the school to retrieve his white Toyota Hilux. Upon arrival, Vincent removed the floorboards from the darkroom, which were soaked with the young woman's bodily fluids. He loaded the wooden planks into his vehicle and returned home. Meanwhile, Aaron tried calling his fiancée, but she didn't answer. He found it odd, but thought she might be deeply focused on her work or that her phone was on silent or out of battery. Before leaving his parents' house, he sent a text to confirm if they would go out for dinner when he got back, but received no reply. By around 7:30 p.m., Aaron arrived at the home they shared, surprised to find neither Stephanie nor her car there. His concern grew when she still hadn't responded to his messages. He decided to drive around town to look for her, checking at the high school, friends' houses, and the main street, but saw no sign of her car. Although increasingly worried, he thought pre-wedding nerves might have driven her to stay elsewhere for the night. So he returned home and tried to sleep. In the early hours of Monday, April 6th, Aaron woke up frequently at every noise, hoping Stephanie had returned. Meanwhile, Vincent had driven Stephanie's car with her body in the trunk to Cocopara National Park. Once there, he placed her on the ground, removed her clothes, and covered her with branches. He then doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. Vincent gathered the removed clothes, the car's sun visor, and the plastic sheet used to cover the trunk and placed them in a bag. Before leaving, he picked up the gasoline canister. Vincent returned home, left the items in the shed, changed his clothes, and abandoned Stephanie's car near an irrigation canal. After 7:30 a.m., he drove around town, disposing of Stephanie's belongings in various trash bins along the main street and near a sports complex. However, he kept her driver's license and engagement in graduation rings. Meanwhile, Aaron had risen early to send another message to his girlfriend but received no response. He started calling friends and the Scott family, but no one had heard from Stephanie. By then, Aaron was convinced something was wrong and went to the police station to report his fiancée missing. The news caused a stir in the peaceful community, which quickly mobilized to search for her. The police immediately launched an operation and triangulated Stephanie's cell phone, but it was either turned off or not functioning. Checking her bank accounts revealed the last transaction occurred on Easter Saturday, and there were no recent social media posts or interactions. When detectives interviewed Stephanie's family, they were seriously concerned and made it clear she wouldn't disappear voluntarily, convinced something terrible had happened. At 8 a.m. on April 7, 2015, the police requested information via social media and the press. The case quickly garnered extensive coverage. A distraught Aaron appeared on television, pleading for his fiancée to call him. Detectives visited the high school searching for clues and inspected Stephanie's classroom. They checked the alarm system to confirm the time she had deactivated and reactivated it, establishing the duration she had been on the premises. Forensic services and a canine unit also arrived to search for evidence not immediately visible. By late Tuesday afternoon, a large group of Stephanie's family and friends gathered, desperate to enter the school, fearing she might be held captive on the grounds. The police convinced them not to force entry. It was then that a neighbor mentioned seeing Vincent, the school cleaner, working on Easter Sunday with his vehicle parked at the institution. Officers went to his house and, when questioned, Vincent admitted being at the school briefly to take out the trash. He denied knowing or seeing Stephanie there and wished them luck in their search, a comment that aroused suspicion in the detectives. The next day, April 8th, they decided to question him again. Since Vincent wasn't home, the police asked his mother to tell her son to contact them. Vincent had gone to the post office to mail a package containing Stephanie's rings and license to his brother. He then texted his brother to ask him to keep the package safe. By around 11 a.m., Vincent arrived at the police station and gave a statement to the detectives. He claimed he had been cleaning the school all weekend and hadn't seen anyone else there, except for some skateboarders who were later identified and interviewed. He added that he went to a supermarket afterward to buy food. This detail caught the officers' attention since they knew the name store was closed on Sundays. They contacted the store manager, who confirmed they were closed for Easter. An hour later, a special task force was activated to investigate the suspicious disappearance of the teacher. The team was composed of specialized agents and was implemented when cases became complex in Australia. The first thing the agents did was interview Vincent's employer, who told them that all his workers had time off for Easter, so Vincent shouldn't have been at the school those days. Detectives then called Vincent to confirm the supermarket story. He repeated his false account, making him the prime suspect. At 6 p.m., the detectives arrived at Vincent's residence. He wasn't there, but his mother and brother were. His mother consented to a search of the house. In Vincent's room, they found a set of keys on a red and white cord matching the description of the keys given to Stephanie by her colleague to access the school. They also found an empty condom wrapper and some unopened ones on the floor. Outside, they noticed fresh tire tracks leading from the front of the house to the backyard that didn't match Vincent's truck. At the end of the tracks, they found a used condom and yellow tape, prompting the agents to declare the area a crime scene. Vincent's family was escorted to the police station. Meanwhile, Vincent had returned to the location where he had abandoned Stephanie's body, taking photos. As he later revealed in an interview, he returned to see if she was still there or if wild animals had taken her. Unbeknownst to him, a group of Boy Scouts camping in the park had taken a photo at 5:34 p.m. that day, which would later be crucial. When Vincent returned home, he told the detectives he had been taking photos. A digital camera was on the passenger seat of his truck, and in the back were wooden planks with reddish stains. The vehicle was confiscated, and detectives asked Vincent to accompany them to the police station. Upon turning on the camera, the investigators saw the first image, burnt human remains in a bush, resembling a woman's body. At the station, Vincent continued denying any contact with Stephanie or her car. Although not yet under arrest, the conversation was recorded with his consent. They questioned Vincent about the various scratches on his face and right forearm. He explained that a week prior, he had hit his head and collided with tree branches. As for the photos found on his camera, Vincent claimed they were from a horror movie he downloaded from the internet because he found them amusing. After the interview, Vincent was placed under arrest and given the opportunity to speak with a lawyer, which he declined. However, he agreed to undergo several forensic tests, including a medical examination of his injuries with photographs and measurements, as well as nail scrapings and a mouth swab for DNA analysis. Once the results were in, the investigators had no doubt. Vincent was charged with the crime against Stephanie Scott, denied bail and taken to jail. When Vincent's brother learned of his brother's arrest, he opened the package and found Stephanie's driver's license and photographed it before burning it. He kept the rings, awaiting further instructions from Vincent. The detectives analyzed Vincent's truck. The GPS system had recorded a trip to Cocopara National Park, and material found on the wheel arches indicated the vehicle had traveled on a gravel or dirt road. Additionally, a closed condom and a cell phone were discovered under the passenger seat. The stains on the wooden planks recovered from the truck were confirmed to be biological fluids matching Stephanie's genetic profile. On the morning of April 9, 2015, the police notified the Scott family of Vincent's arrest and the charges against him, including the photos found on his camera. They withheld the fact that the remains were burnt. However, the information about the burned body leaked to the national media, devastating Stephanie's loved ones. That same day, at 9:30 a.m., a car matching the description of Stephanie's car was found. The area was declared a crime scene, and the vehicle was taken for forensic analysis. Specialists found traces of fluids in the trunk and on the rear bumper, which matched Stephanie's DNA. There were also traces of Vincent's genetic code. A subsequent thorough forensic examination of the Stanford residence uncovered the plastic used to cover the Mazda's trunk and an empty gasoline can behind the shed. Inside, they found Stephanie's keys, a red bra identified by her family, and the sharp weapon used to kill her. In a closet, they discovered a bottle of lubricant, several condoms, and flexible handcuffs, all stained with the victim's blood. They seized a computer from Vincent's bedroom, was later examined by the Electronic Evidence Unit. The hard drive contained numerous images of crimes, sexual assaults, and other disturbing content involving animals, as well as bomb-making materials and surveillance photos and videos of women and students. They also found that Vincent had spent the early hours of April 5th searching the internet for information about knives and had previously researched about abducting women and teachers. Additionally, he had looked into leg cuffs and made an online purchase of flexible handcuffs and a dagger-style knife. At 8 a.m. on April 10, 2015, a witness came forward at the police station, reporting that around 4 p.m. on Monday, they saw a vehicle resembling Vincent's parked by the main irrigation canal. The man said he saw someone throw a laptop into the water before running back to the truck and leaving. The next day, police divers retrieved the device. Forensic technology specialists dried it quickly, downloaded its contents, and confirmed it belonged to Stephanie. Despite police efforts, Stephanie's body remained missing. News outlets published photos of Vincent's vehicle urging anyone with information to contact the police. The scouts who had been in Cocopara National Park on April 8th responded to this call. A photograph taken by one of the boys showed Vincent driving his white truck, leaving the area where he had allegedly abandoned Stephanie's body. Thanks to this lead, near 5 p.m. on April 10th, the day before Stephanie's scheduled wedding, police found charred human remains in a narrow scrubland strip in the park, near a road. Upon analysis, the body was identified as that of the missing teacher. On what should have been Stephanie and Aaron's wedding day, April 11th, 2015, Vincent requested to speak with the lead investigator. Vincent finally confessed to the crime, stating that he had gone a bit crazy and felt an overwhelming urge to take Stephanie's life. He admitted to hitting her about 40 times but offered no reason or emotion behind his actions, suggesting his mental problems had resurfaced. When asked why he had a knife with him, Vincent explained that he kept it in the cleaning room as a tool he had previously used to open something. On April 13, 2015, an autopsy revealed that Stephanie died from blunt force trauma to the head. She had hematomas on the right side of her face, a small laceration on her eyebrow, a fractured nose, and an eye injury consistent with severe impact. Additionally, there were 2 knife wounds on the right side of her neck, with the right internal jugular vein being severed, though no associated hemorrhage was found along the cut's path. On April 21st, Vincent was interviewed again to clarify the details of his confession and to locate Stephanie's rings. Vincent revealed that his brother Marcus had helped with the rings. The next day, after 1 p.m., Stephanie's funeral was held, attended by over 1,500 people, including family, friends, students, and community members. They gathered at the location where she was supposed to marry Aaron. Many wore black with a touch of yellow. Townspeople tied yellow ribbons to trees along the route to the funeral. Stephanie's family and friends shared beautiful tributes about her reflective nature and care for others. On May 9, 2015, Vincent called his twin brother Marcus, asking him to sell the rings. Marcus, in an act he later described as misguided loyalty, pawned them for $705 in Adelaide. In a subsequent phone call, Vincent instructed Marcus to buy a plane ticket to visit him in jail and give the rest of the money to their mother. Marcus followed these instructions and visited Vincent on May 20th. 2 days later, Marcus was interviewed by the police. He denied receiving any packages from his brother and had deleted their text messages. Due to the case's uproar, Marcus and his father decided to move to a different city, where Marcus started working on a flower farm. However, on June 9th, authorities visited Marcus' new home. During the search, they seized a camera, a pawn shop receipt, and his mobile phone. Marcus was arrested and taken to New South Wales, charged as an accessory to murder, and placed in the Unitary Correctional Facility. On August 5th, during questioning, Marcus stated he never understood why Vincent sent him Stephanie's belongings, expressing confusion and anger. 7 months later, on March 31st, 2016, Marcus pleaded guilty. On July 19, 2016, it was Vincent's turn to appear before the same court where he pled guilty to aggravated sexual assault and murder. Psychological evaluations revealed a pattern of social and interpersonal deficits, including an inability to experience emotions, extreme detachment, and indifference to others. It was clear that he harbored violent thoughts, which, when stressed, could reach an intolerable level. He scored high on scales of perversion and violence, though his psychopathy tendencies were low. According to the presented tests, Vincent told the forensic psychologist that being around people was stressful and unpleasant for him. He claimed the crime was not premeditated and that while he did not enjoy committing it, doing so helped reduce his overall tension and overwhelming need to kill the young woman. A month later, on August 24, 2016, Marcus was sentenced to 15 months without parole for being an accessory to his brother after the crime. The judge described his actions as absolutely atrocious, shameful, and unforgivable, noting that despite being driven by misguided loyalty to his brother, Marcus had abandoned morality and human decency in favor of a criminal's interests. Marcus' sentence was retroactive to his arrest, so he was released on September 9th of the same year. Despite nearly 60,000 people signing an online petition to appeal his sentence as insufficient, Marcus expressed regret for helping his brother and publicly apologized, assuring he no longer wanted anything to do with Vincent. He returned to his father's home, but they had to move due to local hostility. They relocated to a rural town in New South Wales, keeping a low profile. A month later, on October 10, 2016, court sessions resumed for Vincent's sentencing. Stephanie's mother took the stand to speak about the emotional impact of the crime. One of her most poignant statements was lamenting that her daughter spent her wedding day in a morgue, without vows or a wedding dance. The video of Vincent's police confession from April 2015 was then shown. As everyone listened in shock, Vincent sat with his head down. Finally, on October 12, 2016, the judge announced the sentence. In his verdict, the judge described Vincent's behavior as deeply disturbing, noting his fluctuations between despair and unmet expectations, leading to deep-seated hatred. He declared the case fell within the worst category and left no doubt about Vincent's guilt. Vincent Stanford was sentenced to 15 years without parole for aggravated sexual assault and life imprisonment for the murder of Stephanie Scott. Upon the verdict's announcement, the public showed support. Just 2 weeks after Vincent's sentencing, another tragedy struck the Scott family. On October 31, 2016, while chopping trees, Bob lost his life when a trunk fell on him at the family farm. In 2018, the Scott family initiated legal action against the New South Wales Department of Education and the cleaning company that employed Vincent, citing ongoing nervous shock, a legal term for permanent psychiatric distress following a relative's death. In June 2020, both parties reached an out-of-court settlement with details kept confidential, and the Scotts received compensation. Aaron managed to rebuild his life, 5 years after the tragedy on July 7, 2020, he announced his engagement on social media. He got married in December of that year and 2 years later welcomed a daughter named Sienna. Many consider Stephanie Scott's murder one of the most heinous crimes in recent Australian history. Such a cruel and inhuman act shook the entire country. Janelle Patton was born on June 30, 1972, in Sydney, Australia. She was an only child, and her parents lavished all their love and attention on her. From a very young age, Janelle developed a passion for music. She played both the piano and clarinet and was active in her school's music group. After finishing high school, Janelle went to university to study medicine. But after just a year, she decided to drop out and focus on her career. She got a job at a bank and spent the next few years working her way up. Over time, though, Janelle started feeling that big city life, with all of its challenges and stresses, was taking a toll on her, and she began thinking about moving somewhere quieter. In October 1999, at 27 years old, Janelle decided to move to a small island called Norfolk. The island was nearly 1,000 miles from Australia. Back then, Norfolk had its own custom regulations and local laws, making it pretty independent from the mainland, but it was still considered part of the country. With a population of around 2,000, everyone in Norfolk knew each other, and because it was so isolated, new faces were rare except for tourists. The island was a popular spot for visitors from both Australia and New Zealand, which was a bit closer. Janelle quickly found a job at a local hotel, got to know the island's residents, and eventually settled into their laid-back way of life. Norfolk felt like a small town, but with the added isolation of being surrounded by nothing but ocean for hundreds of miles. Because of that, locals really tried to get along. After all, they didn't have much choice. In late March 2002, a year and a half after moving, Janelle's parents decided to visit her for the first time, and she was really excited. They arrived on March 30th, and Janelle spent the whole day showing them around, introducing them to the island's main sites and the locals. The next day, Janelle had a morning shift at the hotel, so they planned to meet up as soon as she finished work. She had rented a small cottage on the property of a local woman, but it wasn't big enough to fit her parents, so she booked them a room at a hotel. That morning, Janelle finished her shift around 11 a.m. and set off on her daily walk, something she did regularly. Her route was a short loop from her house to a lookout point at the edge of the island. Her parents expected her to stop by their hotel around noon, but Janelle was running late. At first, they figured she might have gotten caught up with something, so they decided to go for a walk themselves. Before they left, they wrote her a note and stuck it in the door, but when they got back around 2:30 p.m., the note was still there. Realizing that Janelle hadn't come by as planned, her parents started to worry. They tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. It was strange. How could their daughter disappear on such a small island? The thought that something might have happened to her began to creep in. They went to her cottage and found the front door unlocked. But on Norfolk, that wasn't unusual. People rarely locked their doors as crime was practically unheard of on the island. Inside, there was no sign of Janelle and nothing suggested that anything bad had happened. Her car was also parked outside. While they were at the house, one of Janelle's friends showed up. When they told her they hadn't been able to reach Janelle all day, she suggested they check the route Janelle usually took for her daily walk. The three of them drove along the path, but there was no sign of her. After that, her parents returned to the hotel and informed the manager about what was going on. He made a few calls to people around the island, asking if anyone had seen Janelle, but no one had. By then, it was around 8 p.m., and her parents decided it was time to call the police. They explained that their daughter had been missing all day, and the officers asked them to come down to the station. The police informed Janelle's parents that just an hour before their call, a tourist from New Zealand had discovered a body near a waterfall. She had spotted a large black bag and, upon getting closer, saw human hands sticking out from underneath it. When officers arrived at the scene, they found a woman's body showing multiple visible injuries, and her clothes were partly missing. As Janelle's parents were speaking with the police, the officers had just begun processing the crime scene. They immediately suspected that the victim could be Janelle. To spare her parents from the trauma of identifying the body, the investigators asked Janelle's neighbor, the woman she rented the cottage from, to come to the scene. When she arrived, she immediately confirmed that the victim was indeed Janelle. The body was handed over to the medical examiners, but based on the initial assessment, it was clear that they were likely dealing with a murder. The news sent shockwaves through the island community. There hadn't been a murder on Norfolk since 1893, and even minor crimes were rare. The local police were used to handling nothing more serious than fights and domestic disputes, but now they were faced with a homicide investigation. Because of this, they decided to request assistance from Australian investigators, who immediately flew to the island. The medical examiners found 64 injuries on Janelle's body, including bruises and cuts likely caused by a sharp object, possibly broken glass. Supporting this theory, they found glass shards in her hair, which they believed came from a broken bottle. In addition to the cuts, there were bruises on her wrists, suggesting someone had held her down while she was being attacked. This led the investigators to consider that there may have been more than one person involved in the murder. Alongside the cuts from the glass, there were also stab wounds, indicating a knife had been used in the attack as well. Forensic experts found microscopic traces of green and white paint on Janelle's body. These particles were also present on her clothing and in her hair. The experts believed that the paint might have come from the perpetrator or their vehicle, possibly during the disposal of her body. Although part of Janelle's clothing was missing, which initially pointed to a possible sexual motive, the forensic team found no signs of sexual assault. However, they did recover a foreign DNA sample from her body, but it belonged to an unidentified female. The investigation was further complicated by the fact that around 3:30 p.m. on the day of the murder, a brief but intense rainstorm swept across the island. This downpour may have washed away crucial evidence, such as footprints, blood, or other biological samples. However, the rain did help establish a timeline. There were puddles in the black plastic sheet covering Janelle's body, indicating that it had been left there before the rain started. This meant that Janelle had likely been dead and lying there for at least 3 hours before she was discovered. While the forensic experts were busy searching for clues, the police began piecing together the final hours of Janelle's life. They discovered that after finishing her shift, Janelle stopped by a store before heading home. Around the same time, her landlord arrived and saw Janelle leaving for her usual walk. About 10 minutes later, another local resident drove past Janelle on the road. The next person to see her lived near the end of that route and spotted Janelle standing next to a white car talking to the driver. According to the witness, she thought there were 2 men in the car, but admitted it was possible there could have been only one. 5 minutes later, 2 more witnesses who lived close to the road reported hearing what sounded like a child crying in the distance. Another man said he heard a scream, but by the time he went outside to check, the noise had stopped. Based on this information, the police concluded that the attack on Janelle likely took place around 11:45 a.m., just half an hour after she had finished her shift. With no strong leads, the police sent the black plastic sheet that Janelle's body had been wrapped in to the mainland for more advanced testing. Sometime later, the results came back. Forensic experts had found 10 different fingerprints on the sheet, but all of them were partially smeared. Despite this, the detectives decided to try matching the prints. They compiled a list of everyone who had been on the island the day of the murder, which amounted to more than 2,700 names, including both locals and tourists. The police asked all individuals between the ages of 15 and 70 to voluntarily provide fingerprints and DNA samples, but only half complied. Out of 1,300 sets of fingerprints, the experts couldn't find a single match. With no results from the prints, the investigators decided to shift their focus to potential suspects among Janelle's acquaintances. Her diary proved to be a key source of information. It contained detailed entries about life on the island and her relationships with its residents. From the diary, police learned that Janelle had a strained relationship with one of her friends. When Janelle first moved to the island, this woman helped her find a temporary place to live at her friend's house. However, Janelle didn't stay there long, apparently due to some disagreements. But even after Janelle moved out, this man continued to act suspiciously. Several witnesses reported that he had once threatened Janelle in the middle of the street. Police also discovered that after her body was found, he asked a friend to provide him with an alibi and say that they spent the day together, even though it wasn't true. The reason behind his behavior remained unclear, but the police uncovered an interesting detail. It appeared that he was in a secret relationship with Janelle's friend, the one who had helped her with housing. Despite the fact that the woman was married with children, Janelle had written about their affair in her diary, and it was possible that the couple wasn't happy she knew about their secret. Despite this, both the man and the woman provided their fingerprints, and neither matched those found on the plastic sheet. The police also searched their homes and cars, but found no incriminating evidence. The next suspect the police looked into was a man Janelle had been dating for 9 months. He was investigated for possible involvement, but once again, the police couldn't find any evidence linking him to the crime. Janelle's diary also mentions several other people with whom she had tense relationships, but all of them agreed to provide their fingerprints and DNA samples, and none of them matched. At one point, the police even considered Janelle's parents as suspects, since the murder occurred the day after they arrived on the island. But this theory also led nowhere. Eventually, the investigation hit a dead end. For months, the police tried to identify new suspects and re-examine the existing evidence, but every lead turned into a dead end. They even announced a substantial reward of $300,000 for information about the case, but none of the tips brought them any closer to finding the killer. 2 years later, investigators reopened the case and decided to re-examine the fingerprint samples they had collected from locals and tourists. This time, they also included prints from suspects in other recent cases on the island. Since all the prints were stored on paper, experts had to compare them manually. The process took a while, but eventually detectives got a breakthrough call. The fingerprints of a suspect in another case matched 2 prints found on the black tarp used to wrap Janelle's body. That suspect was 26-year-old Glenn McNeil. Shortly after Janelle's murder, police had questioned him in connection with a home invasion, but he wasn't arrested. Despite this, they had taken his fingerprints, which had been stored with the case file ever since. Police also learned that in 2002, McNeil owned a white Honda, matching the description of the car a witness saw near Janelle just minutes before her death. Another curious fact was that McNeil had left the island shortly after the murder. He had moved to Norfolk from New Zealand in 2000 with his wife and worked as a chef, but they later divorced, which also happened around the time of his move from the island. At the time of the investigation, McNeil was living in New Zealand with his new wife and 2 children, which made it difficult for the police to question him. However, they realized that he likely hadn't taken his car off the island, so they decided to search for it, hoping forensic experts could examine it for evidence. Before long, they found it. The white Honda had been abandoned on someone's property, not far from his old house, overgrown with weeds. It was handed over to forensics, and investigators got a warrant to search the house where McNeil had lived during his time on the island. When the experts thoroughly examined the car, they discovered traces of white and green paint that matched the paint particles found on Janelle's body. There were also a few glass shards, and similar fragments were found in his former home. An expert was called in to analyze the samples, and he confirmed that the glass shards from the car, the house, and the ones found on Janelle's clothes and body not only matched but were produced at the same time for a specific type of product. He also discovered parts of an engraving on one of the shards, which turned out to be the name of a wine. This confirmed that all 3 sets of glass shards came from the same wine bottle. In the backyard of McNeil's former house, the police found a black tarp exactly like the one used to wrap Janelle's body. They also discovered several human hairs and some biological traces in the trunk of his car. But unfortunately, both pieces of evidence had deteriorated over time, so the experts couldn't extract any DNA. Not giving up, detectives sent the hairs to a lab in the US, which had the most advanced technology at the time. But the process dragged on for a year. The first lab was overloaded and couldn't get to it right away. In the end, one of the detectives had to fly to the US to hand the samples to a different lab. Finally, in early 2006, the police got the result they were looking for. The hairs were confirmed to belong to Janelle. With all this evidence coming together, detectives secured an arrest warrant and headed to New Zealand to take McNeil into custody. He was then extradited to Australia, where he was officially charged with Janelle's murder. During the first interrogation, McNeil, to the surprise of the detectives, started confessing right away. He claimed that on the morning of the murder, he smoked some weed and went for a drive around the island. At some point, he bent down to grab a pack of cigarettes, lost sight of the road, and hit something. At first, McNeil thought he'd run over an animal, but when he got out of the car, he saw a person lying underneath it. Panicking, he loaded the body into his trunk and drove home, where he spent hours using drugs. A while later, he started hearing noises coming from the trunk and realized the woman was still alive. That's when he grabbed a kitchen knife, opened the trunk, and stabbed her multiple times. After that, McNeil wrapped the body in a tarp and dumped it near the waterfall. Despite his confession, detectives knew immediately he was lying. Almost everything he said didn't match the facts. Medical examiners were sure the injuries Janelle had didn't line up with being hit by a car. Plus, McNeil's story didn't explain the bruises on her wrist, the cuts from glass shards, and why part of her clothing had been removed. And if he really had stabbed her in the trunk, there would have been blood traces there, something the forensic team would never have missed. But there were none. The police tried to get him to tell the truth, pointing out all the inconsistencies, but McNeil stubbornly stuck to his version. In the end, the case went to trial, which began in the summer of 2006. It was held on the island, and the jury was selected from the local residents. At the first hearing, McNeil claimed he had nothing to do with the murder, and even said he didn't remember giving any confession to the police. He blamed his memory lapse on supposed mental health issues, although there was no medical proof to back up his claims. But by the time the trial began, the detectives had dug up something interesting. They knew McNeil's defense team would focus on the fact that female DNA was found on Janelle's body. It wasn't just on her clothes. It was also under her fingernails, which suggested she might have scratched a woman in a struggle before she died. This raised the possibility that a woman was involved in the murder and could have jeopardized the whole case. After McNeil's arrest, the investigators questioned everyone who knew Janelle, asking if there was any connection between her and McNeil. One of her friends remembered something odd. Just 2 or 3 weeks before Janelle's death, she had asked her friend if she knew a woman named Alicia and her husband, Glenn McNeil. The friend replied that she didn't know them personally but had seen them around. Janelle didn't explain why she asked that and just changed the subject. This same friend also mentioned that on the day of the murder, she was working at a hotel and spotted Alicia outside acting weird. Alicia was covered in something red, and when the friend asked if everything was okay, Alicia, who seemed a bit shaken, simply said it was just paint and walked away. For some reason, the witness didn't think to tell the police about this at the time. She didn't realize it could be connected to Janelle's murder until detectives asked her about McNeil and his wife. Alicia was called to testify in court but insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. We still don't know if the police compared her DNA with the female sample from Janelle's body. Interestingly, later on, Janelle's friend changed her testimony and claimed that a religious cult of 6 people was behind her murder. This revelation shocked investigators, casting doubt on all of her previous statements. As for McNeil, he continued to deny any involvement in the murder, still insisting he didn't remember confessing. But despite his claims, with all the evidence presented, the jury found him guilty. On March 9, 2007, he was sentenced to 24 years in prison. Even though the case seemed closed, many people continued to question whether McNeil was truly the killer. The most popular theory, based on witness statements and the nature of the injuries, suggested that he may not have acted alone. Either he killed Janelle with someone else or helped someone dispose of her body. A few years after the trial, McNeil suddenly claimed he knew who really killed Janelle. According to his new story, it was a man who had been selling him drugs. McNeil said that on the morning of the murder, he was at home when this man and his wife showed up. The man told him there was a body in his trunk and ordered McNeil to get rid of it, threatening to harm him and his wife if he didn't comply. Scared for his life, McNeil did as he was told. He moved the body into his own car, wrapped it in a tarp, and took it to the waterfall. He also claimed he wore medical gloves while doing this, but the detectives quickly pointed out a flaw in his story. There were several of his fingerprints on the tarp, which wouldn't have been there if he had used gloves. Plus, he claimed he buried the gloves in his yard. But when police dug up the area, they didn't find anything. McNeil also named the man he claimed killed Janelle, and this guy was indeed suspected of selling illegal substances. When police checked McNeil's phone records, they found he had been in regular contact with him. However, this only suggested that McNeil was buying drugs from him, not that the man was involved in the murder. In the following years, several more theories about this case emerged, each one more dubious and contradictory than the last. Some media even suggested that Janelle was a secret police informant, claiming that could have been the real motive for her murder. But no solid evidence was ever found to support this theory, or any of the others. On February 1, 2024, McNeil was released from prison early and deported back to New Zealand. He will remain under supervision while on probation, but technically he is now a free man. Throughout all these years, McNeil has stuck to his story that other people were responsible for the murder. Maybe one day he'll change his story again and we will finally learn the truth. But until then, this case remains filled with unanswered questions. Alex Murdaugh attempted to follow in his family's footsteps by pursuing a law degree from the University of North Carolina, where he met his future wife, Margaret Maggie Branton. They started dating in 1991 and got married 2 years later, on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex and Maggie had 2 sons, Richard Buster Murdaugh and Paul Murdaugh. Alex joined his family's law firm, PMPD, as a personal injury attorney, aiming to continue his family's legacy. However, Unlike his ancestors, Alex misused the power and influence his family's firm provided, covering up financial crimes, theft, and possibly even murder. For over a decade, Alex's dishonest dealings went unnoticed until his youngest son, Paul, was involved in a fatal boating accident. This incident was the latest in a series of suspicious deaths surrounding the Mutto family, leading people to speculate that these accidents were not coincidental and were instead part of a larger cover-up. Given the family's history and resources, here's what happened on February 23, 2019. Paul Murda, fresh out of high school, took his family's boat to Puka's Island for a party with friends. The group, including his girlfriend Morgan Dowie, Anthony Cook, and Miley Almond, wanted an unsupervised night of fun. They planned a house party and oyster roast on the island. To make the night complete, Paul used his older brother's ID to buy beer and hard liquor. They left the Moordal River House around 7 p.m. and continued partying until midnight. Feeling restless, Paul suggested driving the boat to downtown Beaufort, where he and his friend Connor had 2 rounds of shots at around 1 a.m. As they headed back to the boat, a surveillance camera caught a tender moment between Anthony and Mallory. Paul, who was heavily intoxicated, started acting strangely on a boat ride with friends. At 1:15 a.m., the group got back on the water, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Paul drove the boat in circles, showing signs of intoxication, and got into an argument with the others. Anthony wanted to get out on a nearby rock, but Paul refused. GPS footage later showed that the boat's speed increased at some point. Although Paul denied deliberately speeding up, he was in control of the wheel. The boat crashed into Oro Creek Bridge at 2:20 a.m., throwing Mallory into the water. The others were severely injured. Connor broke his jaw and Morgan's hand was badly hurt. Connor called 911 and help arrived soon after. When the deputy sheriff arrived, he saw blood in the main compartment and a large split in the hull from the impact. All the teenagers involved were extremely drunk, and everyone except Anthony required hospital treatment. Paul refused treatment despite being extremely agitated and having a blood alcohol level of 0.243, significantly higher than the legal limit. The search for Mallory's body took 8 days, and she was found to have died from a combination of blunt force trauma to the head and drowning. Despite multiple eyewitnesses stating that Paul was out of control while driving the boat, he was not arrested or charged. This led to rumors that Alex Murdaugh had used his influence to protect his son from justice. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was served with a wrongful death lawsuit. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, was aware that her son was drunk when they went boating and that Buster had helped them obtain fake IDs to buy alcohol. Paul was finally charged with 3 felonies on April 18, 2019, but he never made it to court because he died before his trial. A series of mysterious deaths have been linked to the Murdaugh family. One incident involved Stephen Smith, a gay teenager, who was found dead on July 8, 2015. His official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, and it was initially ruled a hit-and-run incident with no suspect arrested. However, Stephen's mother believed he was the victim of a hate crime. There were rumors that Stephen was in a relationship with Alex Murdaugh's oldest son, Buster, and that Buster might have been involved in Stephen's death. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper, died on February 26, 2018, due to complications from a severe head injury. Alex Murdaugh claimed that his dogs had caused her to trip and fall, but there was no autopsy to confirm this account. The case was reopened on March 22, 2023, and it was revealed that Gloria's death was actually a murder, although no suspects have been named. Alex Murdaugh's family was involved in a wrongful death lawsuit after his housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, died in 2018. The lawsuit resulted in a $4.3 million insurance policy settlement, but the money never reached Satterfield's sons. Instead, Murdaugh allegedly conspired with his friend Corey Fleming, a lawyer and godfather, to one of Murdaugh's sons to steal the payout. The money was diverted to Murdaugh's bank account and the Satterfield family was never notified. Satterfield's sons filed a new civil lawsuit against Murdaugh in September 2021. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Satterfield's death, citing inconsistencies in the coroner's report. The Satterfield family allowed authorities to exhume Satterfield's body for further investigation. Meanwhile, Murdaugh was facing numerous financial and embezzlement charges. He was allegedly involved in a money laundering and painkiller ring with his distant cousin Curtis Smith, which lasted from 2013 to 2021. On September 4, 2021, Murdoch orchestrated a scheme in which Smith shot him in an attempt to collect a $10 million life insurance policy. However, the bullet only caused superficial injuries, and Murdoch was able to call 911 himself. 2 days later, Murdoch confessed to the scheme and was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. He surrendered himself and was taken into custody. 2 days later, he announced his resignation from his family's law firm and entered rehab. However, it was soon revealed that Murdoch had misappropriated $792,000 from his law firm. His law license was indefinitely suspended in September 2021. Investigators continued to uncover numerous financial crimes, tax evasions, and embezzlements committed by Murdoch. After leaving rehab, Murdoch was arrested again and charged with 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretenses. He was denied bond and later indicted on 27 counts of financial misconduct, accused of stealing money from clients, lawyers, and the Satterfield family. Alex Murdoch faced additional charges on December 9, 2021, with 21 new counts added to the existing 27, bringing the total to 48. The charges included forgery, money laundering, computer crimes, breach of trust, and obtaining signature or property by false pretenses. It was estimated that Murdoch had stolen over $6.2 million from his victims. The state's investigation into his business dealings took months, with new charges emerging almost daily. By June 2022, the charges against him had risen to 81. And by the time he was formally disbarred on July 13, 2022, he faced 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. One of the victims' mothers filed a legal claim against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdoch, raising questions about the character of the once prominent attorney. Could he be hiding something even more sinister, such as the murder of his wife and son? What could have been his motive? The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLRD, revisited the double murder case, considering new information gathered during the investigation into Murdoch's financial crimes. They discovered that Alex and Maggie Murdoch's marriage was troubled, and Maggie was living apart from her husband at their beach home on Edisto Island. Maggie's sister, Marion Proctor, told law enforcement that Maggie had not planned to see Alex on the night of the murders. Alex had asked Maggie to meet him at the family's hunting lodge, where she and her younger son were later found shot dead near the dog kennels. Alex claimed to have taken a long nap before leaving to visit his ailing mother, who suffered from dementia. He stated that he was away for 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and found his wife and son dead upon his return. However, law enforcement suspected that Alex's timeline was questionable and lacked a clear motive for the murders. The investigation revealed that weeks before the murder, the state grand jury had subpoenaed Alex Murdoch's finances, which threatened to expose his financial wrongdoings. Additionally, his law firm had discovered his misappropriation of company funds, and he was confronted about it on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities believed that the financial pressure had pushed Alex to hatch a plan to divert attention from his crimes and garner sympathy in the public eye. 13 months after the fatal shooting, Alex Murdoch was charged with the murders of his wife and son. The prosecutor alleged that Murdoch had shot and killed his wife and son at close range with a shotgun and an AR-style rifle. The murder weapons were never found. Murdoch's defense team argued that 2 shooters were involved due to the different weapons used. Expert witness testimony suggested that the shooter was likely between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches tall, which ruled out Alex Murdoch as a suspect due to his 6'4" 4-inch height. However, under cross-examination, the expert admitted that there were other possible explanations for the bullet trajectory beyond the shooter's height. The investigation revealed that Maggie was shot with 300 blackout ammunition from an AR-style rifle, and a box of this ammo was found at the Murdoch family estate. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid accountability for his financial crimes. Alex's lawyers countered that this didn't make sense as it would only shift attention to himself and put him in the spotlight of a murder investigation. Alex was a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but his lawyer claimed he had an ironclad alibi for the night of the murders and no motive to kill his family. Prosecutors presented 2 videos taken on the night of the murder, which appeared to show Alex wearing different shirts. The Snapchat video taken from Paul's phone showed Alex wearing a blue shirt, while the body cam footage showed him wearing a different shirt. Investigators couldn't find the blue shirt, and prosecutors suggested Alex tried to influence a key witness's account of what he was wearing. Cell phone data and testimony from Alex's mother's caregiver confirmed that Alex was only at his mother's home for 15 to 20 minutes, contradicting his claim of staying for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. The most crucial piece of evidence was a video found on Paul's phone recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders. The video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex, placing Alex at the scene of the crime. This contradicted his previous alibi and confirmed his presence at the dog kennels where the murders occurred. Alex testified that he didn't shoot his wife or son, but admitted to lying about his alibi. Alex Murdaugh changed his story, claiming that his opioid addiction and resulting paranoia led him to lie to law enforcement. However, prosecutors argued that Murdaugh fabricated this excuse after murdering his wife and son. They believed he used his wife's phone to create an alibi by making calls and sending texts, including, "Me, babe," at 9:47 p.m. Phone data showed that Murdaugh's and his wife's phones locked simultaneously, and Alex's phone recorded a sudden increase in steps around the time of the murder. Prosecutors suggested this was evidence of him trying to hide or dispose of evidence, but his lawyers disputed this, pointing out that the step patterns on Alex's phone did not match his wife's. The decisive evidence came from a video recorded at the dog kennels. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury found Murdaugh guilty on all counts on March 2, 2023. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without parole. Additionally, he received a 5-year sentence for possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Murdaugh pleaded guilty to 22 financial crimes as part of a deal, but maintains his innocence in the murders. He appealed his conviction on March 9, 2023. In a surprise move, his lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, alleging that Rebecca Hill, a court clerk, had engaged in jury tampering. Hill denies the allegations, which include advising jurors to disregard Murdaugh's testimony and other defense evidence, pressuring them to reach a quick guilty verdict, and misrepresenting critical information to the trial judge. A hearing is scheduled for Murdaugh's lawyers to present evidence and witnesses to support their claim. However, a judge has not yet been assigned to preside over the hearing. With over 100 financial and drug crime charges pending, as well as multiple lawsuits, it is clear that the Alex Murdaugh case is far from over.